Walk into a crowded room and feel every imagined eye land on you, every flaw magnified, the whole room somehow clocking the exact thing you're insecure about. If that feeling is familiar, here's what's going to be hard to believe. That audience is almost entirely empty, and scientists proved it with a Barry Manilow t-shirt. Because right now, there's a version of you living inside your own head that no one else can see, and you are watching it, constantly. You replay a conversation from 3 years ago and physically cringe. You rehearse a text before you send it, then reread it after, certain the other person is dissecting every word. It feels like you're on a stage you never auditioned for, performing for an audience that is always watching. Stay with me, because once you understand what's actually happening in the mind of a self-conscious person, you may never see that imaginary spotlight the same way again. Let's name what this actually is, because self-consciousness isn't just shyness, and it isn't a character flaw. It's a specific psychological process, a state where your attention, instead of pointing outward at the world, folds back and points at yourself. Psychologists call it self-focused attention. Most people, most of the time, are looking out, at the conversation, the task, the room. A self-conscious person has an inner camera crew that is swung around and is now filming them, in close-up, at all times. You're not just living the moment, you're simultaneously watching yourself live it and judging the footage in real time. And that split, being both the performer and the critic in the front row, is the entire experience of being too self-conscious. But where does that imaginary audience come from? That's where the science gets genuinely surprising. In the late 1990s, a Cornell psychologist named Thomas Gilovich designed one of the quietly most brilliant experiments in social psychology. He took a student and had them put on a t-shirt chosen to be as embarrassing as possible, a big photo of the singer Barry Manilow, whom this group of students found deeply uncool. Then he sent that student into a room where 4 or 5 others were already sitting, filling out questionnaires. The embarrassed student sat down, stewed in it for a few minutes, and got pulled back out. And Gilovich asked them one question: how many of the people in that room do you think noticed your shirt? On average, the wearers were certain that around half the room, about 46%, had clocked the humiliating shirt. Then Gilovich asked the actual people in the room. The real number who noticed? About 23%, barely half of what the wearer was convinced of. They had imagined an audience twice the size of the one that actually existed. And that gap, between the attention you feel and the attention you actually get, has a name. Gilovich called it the spotlight effect. Here's the finding that should genuinely change how you walk through the world. You are not the main character in other people's minds. They are. The spotlight effect exists because every single person is starring in their own movie, running their own inner camera crew, worrying about their own shirt. So the man who trips on the stairs replays it all night, certain everyone saw, while everyone who saw it forgot within 90 seconds, because they were busy worrying about their own stumble, their own hair, their own awkward comment. The terrifying, all-seeing audience you perform for is a mirage. Everyone is too self-conscious about themselves to be the audience you fear. It's one of the strangest facts about being human. We are all on stage, and all also too distracted by our own performance to watch anyone else's. But if the audience is imaginary, why does it feel so unbelievably real? This goes a layer deeper, into your own body. Because a self-conscious person isn't just guessing they're being watched. They feel it, physically. And Gilovich found the reason for that too, in a companion idea called the illusion of transparency. This is the belief that your inner state, your nervousness, your embarrassment, your racing heart, is visible on the outside, leaking out for everyone to see. In one study, people had to hide their disgust while tasting a foul drink, and they were sure observers could see right through them. The observers mostly couldn't. And here's the engine underneath it. You judge how obvious your anxiety is by how it feels on the inside. Your heart is pounding, your face feels hot, your mind is screaming, so you assume it must be written all over you. But almost none of that internal storm reaches the surface. The gap between the hurricane inside you and the calm the world actually sees is enormous. You are the only person who can feel your storm, and you mistake feeling it for everyone seeing it. Now I have to be honest about something, because there's a real division here that matters. Psychologists split self-consciousness into 2 very different types, and one of them is far heavier to carry. The first is public self-consciousness, awareness of yourself as a social object, how you look, how you come across. That's the Manilow shirt kind. But the second is private self-consciousness, a relentless inward attention to your own thoughts, feelings, and motives. And research on socially anxious people found something striking. It was private self-consciousness, that constant internal self-monitoring, that most strongly predicted people rating their own social performance as far worse than observers rated it. In other words, the people who watch themselves hardest on the inside are the ones most convinced they're failing on the outside, even when they're not. The inner critic isn't just loud, it's a liar. It consistently scores you more harshly than any real person in the room would. So let's put the whole picture together, because it explains the entire exhausting experience. When you're too self-conscious, your attention is trapped facing inward, filming and judging you. That inner camera invents a spotlight, an audience that feels enormous but is mostly empty, because everyone else is trapped facing their own inward camera. Your private self-monitoring rates your performance far more harshly than reality would. And the illusion of transparency convinces you everyone can see your failure as clearly as you can feel it. 4 distortions, stacked on top of each other, all pointing the same way, toward the certainty that you're being watched, judged, and found wanting. And every single one of them is your own mind lying to you. Which points at the way out, and it's not what you'd think. The instinct, when you feel self-conscious, is to try harder to manage yourself, monitor more, control more, perform better. But that pours fuel on the fire, because the problem was never your performance. The problem is the direction your attention is pointing. Self-consciousness is, at its core, an attention problem. Too much spotlight aimed inward. And the fix isn't to think better thoughts about yourself. It's to think about yourself less. To deliberately swing that camera back outward, onto the conversation, the person in front of you, the actual room. Not by forcing fake confidence, but because outward focus starves the inner critic of the attention it feeds on. The self-conscious mind heals not by winning the performance, but by finally realizing there was never an audience and putting the camera down. So the next time you walk into a room and feel that spotlight snap onto you, remember the Manilow shirt. Remember the audience is half the size you think. The half that's there forgets in 90 seconds. And the storm you're sure everyone sees is one only you can feel. The stage was always empty. You were performing for no one. If this describes something you felt your whole life, tell me in the comments. When did you first notice your own spotlight? I read them all. Subscribe if you want more of the mind explained properly, and I'll see you in the next one.